the Land Rover Defender. It doesn't get more British than this. It's a bit like the automotive equivalent of a Wordsworth prose or a Turner painting or Tea and Tiffin with Her Majesty the Queen. And like the Queen, the Defender, well, it's been getting on a little bit, and of course Land Rover had a massive task with how to replace it and retain some of those quirks and idiosyncrasies Defender was always loved for. And their answer was pure and simple. They started with a completely clean sheet of paper. But that hasn't stopped others trying to get the old workhorse bang up to date, and doing so quite successfully. Welcome to another episode of Electric Icons, welcome to the world of Twisted, and welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we go on to this week's episode of Electric Icons, I'd like you to do me a little favour. If you could be so kind, can you make sure you're subscribed to the AutoEV channel? And once you've done that, make sure you've pressed the little bell button that's down below, because that way you'll receive notification of when our next episode goes live. Once you've watched the video, if you like what we see, give us a bit of a thumbs up and maybe leave us some comments in the box down below. Good or bad, let us know how we're doing. Now, who are Twisted? Well, if you are immersed in the world of Land Rover, they're probably not an unfamiliar name to you. They're probably one of the most original modifiers of Land Rovers. They've been on the go for quite a few years now, and they're synonymous with taking big crate V8 American engines and slotting them into the archaic chassis of a Defender. Although that's probably doing them a little bit of a disservice, as there's a lot more to it and the company than that. Handling kits, bespoke interiors, bespoke paintwork, and of course styling. But the world's changing, and Twisted are now embracing the world of electrification, because let's be honest, whilst the thought of a great big thumping V8 in one of these is a nice thing, the practicality of it is slightly different. Now, this isn't a cheap car, as we'll see when we get through to the pricing section, but is it worth it? Well, let's take a bit of a deeper delve into the company and the new Defender Electric and find out. Now, depending on the size of the Defender will depend obviously on the size of the battery. If it's a 90, like this one, then it's a 61 kilowatt hour battery, and that should give a range of around about 140 miles. If you go for a 110, the longer wheelbase Defender, then that's going to have an 81 kilowatt hour battery, and the range will extend up to around about 180 miles. On that one. None of the cars come with DC rapid charging. They stick with a 22 kilowatt three-phase charging system, meaning that to replenish the battery in them will be around about 3 hours from a 22 kilowatt hour battery. But if you plug it into your 7 kilowatt wall box at home, then you're looking at around about 7 to 8 hours. Now, the weight has increased by about 300 kilos over the standard Defender, but you do have 268 brake horsepower to whisk you along, and 885 pounds per foot of twisting torque to get you out of trouble. Now, there may be some of you out there who would naturally think that all that Twisted do is just remove the old diesel engine and slot in some Tesla batteries and a motor. But to do that would be doing them a real disservice. You see, there's a huge amount of re-engineering has gone into this, and that is where Twisted really excels, and that is what helps justify the cost of this car. Now, underneath is a Dana TN4 Sumo motors, along with batteries which are both liquid cooled and heated, so they're able to maintain a steady operating temperature. And this is all built in the Netherlands to Twisted's own bespoke specification. And they've also asked for it to be able to work in conjunction with a low range transfer box and a centre locking differential. Now, you may question why you would need that, because obviously the benefit of electric motors is to provide an awful lot of instantaneous power and torque from the get-go. But the reason that they wanted to retain that is to make sure that the Defender still retained its legendary off-road capabilities, and again, make sure that it retained a lot of the things that people love about the Land Rover Defender. But don't just think of it as Twisted just taking out an old diesel engine and slotting an EV drivetrain into it, because this is what stands the company apart. You see, this isn't your typical Defender, and that is, well, that's a good thing, because as much as it is revered and idolised by many, it's also criticised and hated by a few, because the build can't really justify the price. And as I say, that's where Twisted come into their own, because what this is a complete re-engineering of the Defender, Take the doors, for instance, a renowned part on a Land Rover Defender that usually lets in about as much water as a sluice gate in a Yorkshire river. Here at Twisted, they have spent literally hundreds, if not thousands of hours developing new door seals and making the doors fit properly so they shut properly and keep the water out. Talking of water, the wading ability of the new Twisted goes from 500mm of a standard Defender to 900mm depth. Now, granted, that's probably of more use to somebody up here in the Yorkshire Dales than it will be if you're in Kensington, but it's nice to know that it can do it, and that's as much as the new Range Rover can do, which Land Rover have spent millions of pounds developing. That's thanks to batteries which are IP67 water resistant, and they're located up here at the front where the engine used to be, not underneath like some do, because obviously if they're underneath, then your ground clearance is impeded into, and of course the Defender is renowned for its off-road ability, so you can't have that. And they're not in the back like some people do them, because obviously again the Defender is a very practical car. So the practicality is retained, the off-road ability is retained, and all the bad bits that people don't like about Defenders are banished. I'm starting to struggle to find a bad thing about this. So I'm joined here today at Twisted's HQ in Thirsk in Yorkshire by Charles Fawcett, founder of Twisted. Charles, first of all, thanks ever so much for allowing me to come here today and obviously sample the new Twisted
great to see you.
Defender.
Yeah.
So Twisted, as I said, is a name that's quite synonymous in the Land Rover world, but obviously if anybody's looking and who don't know about you, tell us a bit more about the company. How did it start? Where did it come from?
Twisted now is a group of guys and girls based in North Yorkshire in a little sleepy market town of Thirsk. We build vehicles, ship them all over the world, electric, diesel, petrol. Defender is our core product. Mm-hmm. We have chosen not to stray from that. For 22 years, we've focused on the Land Rover Defender. And like a lot of these things, it starts with a passion somewhere. It starts as a hobby of some sort. And we were tuning and modifying Defender a lot of years ago, and the products we developed were seen and recognised and understood, and we were doing something that people weren't doing. And the business in essence evolved. Mm-hmm. A lot of our development comes off the back of a customer comment.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
So, you know, we have lots of ideas, and actually here we are 6 years after the end of production of the Land Rover Defender, mm-hmm. and we're still developing, and in fact we're probably developing more product now than we've ever developed. Mm-hmm. I'd have thought we'd run out of things to do by now, but customers will come to us with an idea, a concept, something they want to try and create, something they want to do, a particular purpose for a vehicle, mm-hmm. and we run with it. Yeah. So.
And is that where the sort of like the electric idea came from, or was that more an internal thought, as in the world's changing, we need to adapt to it?
Electric was internal. I guess as a die-hard Defender mm-hmm. owner, driver and fan, I was struggling a little with the concept of electric.
Okay, yeah.
Defender has a certain mannerism. It has a certain way. There's a charm to it. Mm. Anybody sensible wouldn't drive a Defender, really, as a car. But as an extension of your own character, the Defender is just this brilliant vehicle that's ultimately analogue, and the feedback you get from it and the communication, the involvement, it's just a brilliant vehicle. Yeah. So making that electric didn't feel like the right thing to do mm-hmm. for me. The reality is, you know, we're getting hammered with PR and noise about electric being the future, and it obviously is. Whether it's a long-term future or not, I don't know. But we saw the need to join the throng of companies looking into electric, and we met with some guys in Holland. Fabulous engineers, and they'd created a system for Defender, which we took, we poured over, we enjoyed, we suffered, we used, and then we went back to them and said, look, right, now let's make this a Twisted EV system. Yeah, because there's a lot of people out there, as we know, and as you've said before, that just do conversions and still take what's out there existing, i.e. like Tesla batteries and motors, and just kind of slip out the engine and sling that in instead. Yeah. That's not the Twisted way, is it? That would be for us, that would be a very easy solution.
Yeah.
The challenge with Defender and lots of classic vehicles is integrating a new system of any sort, but maintaining the integrity of the vehicle.
Yeah.
There are certain things that a Defender does, there are certain things it has that I don't want to remove when making any of our changes.
Yeah.
It would be very easy to start from the ground up. It would be very easy to use something available off the shelf and sort of make it fit. But Defender has a transmission lock handbrake. It has a diff lock in the centre, in the transfer box. It's got low box. It's got neutral, which originally would have been used for PTO. I didn't want to lose any of those things.
Okay.
So we also didn't want to modify the chassis. We didn't want to have to cut or weld. We didn't want to make any change that would affect the registration of the vehicle, because everything we're doing is, it's all post-registration. There's no IVA required. There's no additional hoops we need to jump through. We're a modifier in essence, but you have to be very careful what you do and how you do it.
Right.
Otherwise you fall then into the realms of IVA and so on. So it was important that we met these certain criteria and that this vehicle was true to its roots. It was still a Defender. That caused a lot of problems.
Okay.
And took a lot of time and a lot of money. But having used this now for many months, I've been off-roading in it, I've been to town in it, I've towed trailers with it, I've done all sorts, just using it as a normal Defender.
Yeah.
I've not yet found a flaw. There's always going to be range anxiety with any electric vehicle.
Absolutely.
You know, you can't just nip in and chuck a gallon in. You've got to think things through. I don't have a charger at home, but when I've been caught out, I just plug it into the 3-pin, and overnight I've got 80 miles range or whatever.
Which for some could be like a week's commute if you think about that.
Absolutely, yeah. I took this for a day out a few weeks ago, and I did 5.5 hours solid driving in it. A mixture of on-road, off-road, back roads, little postman backcountry roads, B roads, A roads. Drove it really hard, drove it really gently. I had just a real mixed day, and I was 5.5 hours I was driving it for. It did everything it needed to do. Yeah, brilliant.
Now, in terms of Twisted's order bank or interest, if you like, and have you seen a massive increase of people wanting to go electric with Defender, or are you kind of showcasing this to them in the hope that that's going to come to you, if that makes sense? Or are people coming to you now saying, can you electrify this for me?
It's probably a bit of all of that.
Okay.
The reality is petrol is still very easy, and it's easy, it's understood, it's simple. There are very few limitations and restrictions with petrol. Diesel is becoming a little bit of a frowned on proposition. So probably for every EV, I think we'll probably still build 9 petrols. But I would think for every build, we probably get 100 EV inquiries.
No, okay.
The level of inquiry is significant. Understanding, however, where Defender, Twisted Defender and electric Twisted Defender fits in your lifestyle is everybody's challenge, because I go back to my first point, it's not ever going to be an everyday vehicle. There are diehards, you know, Rob in sales, in a meeting this morning, we were talking about going to Edinburgh, and he said, I'll do that there and back in the day in my Defender. You know, he's an absolute diehard. I choose to drive a diesel Audi most of the week because I bat around all over the place and I don't want to think about what I'm driving. But when you get home on a weekend, the Defender is, it's the car of choice because they're fun, they're exciting, they're interesting, they're different. Electric has got a way to go. And we need to get over the complications of being electric and those, you know, range anxiety concerns, you know, obviously the other issues people talk about and the convenience of charging. So I think petrol will continue to be a significant part of us and our business, but electric will gradually catch up, I think.
Okay. No, as you say, you're putting your name on this. I mean, let's be honest with you. So, in terms of when you set out on the journey to build an electric Defender, what was the sort of, take us down that path? What were the things you had to have? What were the things that you just didn't want? How before you put your badge on it?
It just needed to be a true Defender. I didn't want to lose any of its credibility just for the fact it's electric. The vehicle has such a huge lifespan. I think it's fair to say that converting to electric is lengthening that.
Yeah.
It's giving it a greater future. In the city, the electric and the petrol are brilliant. We managed to navigate the ULEZ with them, which is great.
And that's becoming really important nowadays, not just in London, across the country, and dare I say, in the world.
They're adding to the cities all the time, being added to the list.
Yeah.
So Defender had to still do everything it ever did. It had to still look like a Defender. Twisted is clearly the name that we put on it. That is us. We have a certain way of doing things. Our motto is the best made better. We're not being arrogant with that. We're not saying we're the best. We just say we take the best product and we make it better. Yeah. The Defender is iconic. It is a certain style and type of vehicle. It's almost the one we all drew when we were a kid. A couple of boxes and a couple of circles. You've got a Defender. Yeah. And we have to remain true to that. Yeah. That is who we are and what we do. So the electrification of it had to keep all those little facets and assets. Defenderisms is what we call them. Yeah. There would be no point ripping its guts out and just slotting anything in to make it electric. It had to have all of those things.
Yeah. One of the things that's really impressed me with with being here today and having a look at not just this car but all the cars here is the quality. And that's obviously hugely important to you. I mean, you've got a team of engineers, at your factory that's building these. I mean, there's a huge amount of hours goes into, not just the conversion, but everything you do, I assume, in terms of the leather, what's beautiful, everything else. And that's obviously really, really important to retain that for you.
It's a business that could never be run by accountants because very little of it makes sense. We have a great accountant, we have a great FD, but when you try to apply logic to what we do, you run out of excuses. Our guys that build the vehicles and the guys and girls that source, develop and find the components think in a certain way. And it's very early in their career with us that we find out whether they're right or wrong. Nothing is rushed, nothing is, there's never a corner cut. They do everything in a very twisted way, and the end product speaks for itself. Yeah. The challenge is what we do is expensive, and sometimes it's hard to quantify when what you finish up with is actually that box you'd have drawn as a kid with, it's still just at a glance a Defender. And I think if we were slightly more elaborate in our styling, a little bit more flamboyant, it might be easier to quantify the cost. Yeah. But because so much of it is hidden, it's very difficult to do that. I see, yeah. But those that know, it's a Twisted, it'll be the best I can buy.
Yeah. And you've got a loyal brand of followers, haven't you? I mean, you really do. Twisted customer. We've met a few here today.
Phenomenal customers. And sometimes they'll just pick up the phone and say, hey, just get me another one, and I want it to do this, and I want it to do that, and they just leave us to it. And then we've got other customers who want to be involved with every little detail and understand what's going into their build. All of these are fine. Yeah. We've got other customers that want to, they have their own vehicle and they want to fit certain elements of what we do. And we get people calling up with a Defender and they live in the city and they want it to be electric. Everything and all. Yeah. The benefit of all the years of product development is if you have a Defender, we can improve it. Yeah. And it might be suspension, it might be a light, it could be a change to seat position or a different engine. We focus so hard on that one vehicle, we're able to.
You're able to do it.
Work almost with anybody, really.
Yeah. And moving forward, where's the? I mean, obviously Land Rover have replaced the Defender now with their new Defender, which, as I said, doesn't I mean, they literally started with a clean sheet of paper. I mean, other than the name and a few styling nods, there's nothing really that's the same. Moving forward for Twisted, where's the future for the company?
There will always be a core team that work only on Classic Defender.
Right.
That will never change. We will, at some point, introduce new people and maybe a new facility and a new method to work with possibly new Defender, possibly Grenadier, possibly Classic Range Rover. There'll be some carryover.
Yeah.
But the core team that work right now on Classic will continue. It's a big part of the Defender aftermarket is huge.
Well, there's a lot of cars out there.
And there are lots of people doing bits of what we do,
Yeah.
but there is nobody doing this full, thought through
Yeah.
Defender modification, I'll call it. We're nearly builders because, like in the States, we physically build a car.
Of
from
course,
start
yeah,
to-
you're in
from
the
start
US
to
as
finish.
well.
So, you know, we are a modifier, but
Yeah.
it's going to come to a point where we become a builder of sorts.
Yeah.
So, you know, I see longevity with this. It's why we ordered so many at the end of production. You know, I wanted to make sure we had a good stock of core vehicles to build from. I didn't want to be buying any old junk in the aftermarket and trying to sort it out and then put our name on it.
Yeah.
So there's a certain, when a vehicle gets our branding on it, you know, there are stickers available on eBay, not by us, but you can buy Twisted stickers. There's a company in Indonesia have copied our build plaque, changed a couple of letters on it, but it looks like a Twisted build plaque. These things are available, but when we fit a build plaque and we fit our Yorkshire plaques and the aircon panel and so on, that vehicle has gone through a certain process.
Yeah.
It's been built in a certain way with certain components, and those things are what we say make it a Twisted.
Right.
The moment you jump in it and drive it, you go, right, yeah, I can tell. You know, I can see why this is all done. And if you missed any one of those things out, you'd also see why we say it needs to be in there.
Yeah.
So a Twisted is built in a certain way with certain things. Which engine you choose and which, you know, colour it is and what type of roof it has, that's all kind of secondary. There's a way we build things.
It's the core engineering.
Our challenge, going back to your question about other vehicles in future, our challenge is taking that thinking to something, for example, new Defender. It's phenomenal. It's an amazing piece of kit. How can you make that better?
Yeah.
You know, the manufacturer have pumped millions and billions into creating that vehicle. How can you make it better? And that's probably why we've dragged our heels with it and kept away from it. Hey, you can go and get a body kit and a spoiler and a wheel and a this, that and the other for it. But does it make it better? No, it probably makes it slower, probably makes it noisier, probably makes it worse on fuel, probably makes it corrode more. You know, so you've got to be so careful with what you do with vehicles, and we are cautious in that sense.
Yeah.
So the only things we'll engage with is when we can make a succinct difference.
Yeah, and then it
For
becomes
the better.
a Twisted
Exactly.
Defender.
Yeah.
Well, look, Charles, thank you ever so much for your time today. And
Great to see you.
the guys here have been phenomenal with us today, and obviously the machine is quite something special. So, yeah, thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so first things first, it's a Defender, which means, well, it's not the most refined drive in the world, let's be honest. If you're coming out of an X5 or an Audi Q7 and expecting a Defender to be the absolute paragon of refinement, then you are going to be very much in for a disappointment. The second thing I have to apologise for is the noise, because this is a soft top Defender and we've actually put the rear windows down in it because otherwise it kind of flaps around a little bit and impedes into my microphone, as does the sat-nav lady. However, let's get back to the Twisted. First things first, yes, it's a Defender, but it's a Twisted Defender, and it feels very different whilst at the same time feeling very, very similar to any other Defender. The suspension has a compliancy to it. The spring rates and the dampers have been tuned to Twisted's own specification, and I can't quite convey this enough how well this handles for a Defender. It's an odd feeling to go around corners as quickly as you do in this. Now, the motor it's a single motor, it's not dual motor, so although it retains the four-wheel drive, it obviously provides the power through the transfer box. So it doesn't have twin motors, it's a single motor unit, and as I say, it's about 268 brake horsepower. Apologies for her again. It's about 268 brake horsepower. So it does feel quite sprightly. It certainly feels a lot quicker if you're coming from, say, a normal diesel Defender. It feels very, very different for obvious reasons. But the steering, yes, you've got this smaller kind of motor litre wheel on it, but it still feels like a Defender in terms of it's where the steering is and the steering angle. And when you turn into a bend, it doesn't unlock. You've got to unlock it. You know, it's got that kind of slow kind of. You've got to unwind everything as the steering's coming off, which is absolutely fine because, as I say, that's what you expect it to be like, and it doesn't disappoint. It's exactly the same as you'd expect. But when you put your foot down, it really does pick up. It really does. Now, there's 3 modes in the Twisted. You've got your standard mode. Now, all the buttons down here for it. So you've got the standard mode when it glows kind of green, and then you press it and it glows blue. That's it in sport. And the throttle's got a really, you can feel it sharpen up, but it's not it's not out of control. You can still feel the progression of the controls, the weight of the control. And again, that's what it's all about. It's having that feel of the original car in here with a completely different twist on it. Again, if you pardon the pun. Now, this is still in development, this car, in some respects. So there are going to be tweaks done to it before kind of customer cars are delivered. And Charles was telling me earlier, so the control system that's down here, well, you've got your gears down here on push button, you've got drive, neutral and reverse, an emergency stop, one that tells you when it's charging, and then your mode button, and then next to that there's a screen, and that tells you your range on it as well, and that also will be able to put you from into high range into low range, and activate the centre diff. That's all going to get moved up into a slightly higher console. That's in development at the moment. They're going to have that further up here, so it's not quite the reach down there. And then the buttons for the transmission will go onto the screen as well. So there is a bit of high tech coming to this as well, which is quite nice. But the driving position is exactly as you expect to find in a Defender. You still knock your elbow against the door as you're driving, although the window ledge is quite a nice place to put your armrest, use as an armrest. Upright screen, all the controls where you find them, and from here, as I said earlier, you don't know you're driving an electric Defender by what you're looking at, because the instrument panel is exactly the same. If there was a big gear stick sticking up here, I wouldn't be shocked. It would be exactly as I'd expect to find it. You can't compare this to anything other than another Defender, because it is exactly as you expect to find. And whilst it's archaic in a lot of ways, it's moved a lot of the things that we all love about the Land Rover Defender on a bit. So they've managed to retain all the stuff that, if you're a Defender fan, you will absolutely love, whilst progressing it on with new age technology, with electric drivetrain, and dare I say it, with a quality that I think you'd be quite shocked at coming from a Defender that came out of Load Lane. I like it. I really like it. And I never thought I'd say that about a Land Rover Defender. This is great fun. It's very noisy though. It's very noisy with the windows out, yeah? I would think in the Bahamas, perfect. Sunny day in Cornwall. bit of a overcast day in North Yorkshire, not so much. Still, I've had worse days. Now, when you lift off the throttle, there is, you can feel a form of regeneration coming back through. I think it's done through the motor, not the actual brakes. So I think it's all through the motor. You can feel it just kind of wind itself back a little bit, which is nice. And it makes driving it nice and easy, I have to say. And I think that, coupled with the sort of like the weight of the accelerator pedal and the progression of the throttle, just makes it quite easy to drive, if I'm honest with you. It's not a difficult car to get to grips with at all. The steering's nice, as I say. The driving position is exactly as you expect to find. It's got a nice weight behind it. Yeah, it's quite slow, but the original cars is quite slow. And as I say, there's not, the lock doesn't come off itself. You've got to unwind it back, which I quite like. What's surprising me and what I'm really liking is the spring and the damper rates that are tuned into these eyebacks. It doesn't feel a hard car to drive. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's something you'd want to do 200-300 miles in up and down the motorways of Britain. But on these nice little back twisty roads in Yorkshire near Thirsk, the body control is really good. It's not what you expect. There is an element of lean in it. You go into a bend and there is an element of lean. I think too many people fit stiffer springs and dampers to Defenders and expect them just to be sporty, and that's not going to work. You've got to have an element of body lean. That's what makes it comfortable. Just, your body moves with the car, and that does it. And it's a testament to the guys here that have worked with the engineers at IBAC and tuned these dampers and these spring rates the way they have. It's superb, really good, really, really good. I think what's important to understand with the Twisted is that it's still in development. There is still a way to go with this car, and that again is something that I've been really impressed with visiting the guys today. The amount of development work that they're putting into it, the amount of that's not quite right, we just need to do that a little bit better, or that needs changing and that needs sorting out and things like that. That's a proper engineering firm to me. They're always striving to be better at it. They're always striving to find a better solution, a better way of doing it. And that's what I really, really like about Twisted. They haven't just come out with something and gone, you know what? That's it, that's good enough. That's what people will want. They're striving to be better. And I really like that. I admire that in a company like Twisted. Now let's talk about price, because, well, there's no getting away from it. This is not an inexpensive car. Twisted are looking to do an EV conversion for someone with a Defender, and it coming in at round about somewhere in the £60,000 bracket. But if you want a brand new bespoke build, such as this, then it's going to be somewhere prices starting from £180,000 plus the VAT. This particular car here is just a shade over £220,000 plus the VAT. Now, on initial things, you might say, well, that's a huge amount of money for an electric Defender that only does 130, 140 miles. Let me justify this a little bit, because having spent the time with these guys here today and having seen the amount of re-engineering that goes into the product, I genuinely think this is, well, I wouldn't say a bargain, but I tell you what, the amount of development cost I've gone into it is absolutely huge. Take the suspension, for instance, the Bilstein dampers. They are bespoke to Twisted's own specification. You can't go and buy one of these from Bilstein. It's done to Twisted's standard. The particular wheels, they are Twisted's. They are built exactly to their specification. Silly things like the mesh on the side of the grills, they've spent years getting just the right thickness and the right quality, so they're happy to put their name on it. The laser lights, daytime running lights in the front bumpers, that's their own bespoke build. The way that the front end is machined and then painted and then fitted back in. The grille that's reminiscent of a Series 1 V8, it's not a diamond cut, it's exactly how it would have been on the Land Rover, but just done an awful lot better, and that is the core thing here. The bespoke audio system that's in the car, yes, you can go and buy those components, but it will not be to the same specification that Twisted asked the audio equipment people to do, and that's the difference. This has to be seen as a very bespoke luxury product, purely from an engineering point of view, and that was what makes Twisted stand apart from everyone else who tinkers around with old Defenders. So how do we sum up Twisted's first electrified Land Rover? Well, look, I'm going to start by saying this. I've never been the Defender's biggest fan, if I'm being completely honest. I love Land Rover, don't get me wrong, I love Land Rover product. My wife's had a Freelander and I've had a Range Rover in the past, and I, back in the mid-1990s, actually used to sell Land Rovers. So I do get them, and I think that's the key with especially the Defender. If you get it, you really get it, and if you are able to get it, then you will absolutely love the Defender without shadow of a doubt. If you don't get it, then perhaps you never will. It's a bit like Porsche 911s, it's a bit like Beetles, it's a bit like old Minis. The people that, you know, understand them and really get under the skin won't hear anything bad said about them. And of course the Defender crowd is no different. But here's the thing, this isn't really just a Land Rover Defender. This is a Twisted Defender, and that is the key here. And that's the thing that by coming here today and by spending the time with Charles and the boys and girls at Twisted, I really get now. It's the depth of engineering that goes into something like this. And okay, yes, we are focused obviously on the electric version, but it's the same applies across all of the cars that they build. It's the re-engineering, it's the level of development that goes into it that retains everything that people love about the Defender, but makes it even better. Now this electric version, I think, is the key for them moving forward in terms of acceptability, because let's be honest with you, when we have something like our big SUVs, we are a bit reluctant to let go of them, but there is obviously a backlash towards them, certainly within the inner city environment. Okay, maybe up here in Yorkshire it's not quite so bad, but certainly in the main cities where people are driving in and out every day in big diesel engine 4x4s, there's a question mark hanging over that. By electrifying it, however, you are having your cake and eating it. It's just that your cake's now electric. And I don't think there's a better badge to have on that cake than Twisted. Thank you ever so much for watching another episode of Electric Icons on AutoEV. Please remember, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Once you've done that, if you press the little bell button that's down below, because then you'll be notified of when our next video goes live. If you like what you see, then make sure you give us a thumbs up and leave some comments for us. Good or bad, let us know what you like or you don't like about us. Remember, we're also on all social media platforms, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Give us a like over on there as well, because every little bit helps us. And if this has just whetted your appetite for even more, then obviously stick on our YouTube channel, because there are previous Electric Icon episodes, and also there are reviews on all the new electric cars to hit the market. All that remains for me to say is thank you ever so much to Charles and the staff here at Twisted for hosting us here today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe, and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.